You probably read this title out loud to yourself and immediately scratched your head, considering I've already praised Resident Evil 4 as my favorite game in the infamous action horror franchise. With the amount of replayability, it's hard to consider a possible contender against one of the most awarded and greatest Resident Evil games of all time. Long after Resident Evil 6, I was confused. I hadn't heard of anything new coming to the Resident Evil series for a long time, since the 6th game almost destroyed the franchise. I played every campaign when I was younger, and I found myself frustrated and underwhelmed at the nonsensical, over-the-top action gameplay. I mean, this isn't a Resident Evil game. I'd consider it more like a Tom Clancy zombie game more than I would ever correlate it to Resident Evil. I mean, look at these two back to back. Would you believe me if I said they were made by the same company? I get that time passes and change is necessary with new writers and technological advancements, but Resident Evil 6 was just garbage. That's when suddenly, the trailer for Resident Evil 7 was announced. My face lit up like Christmas. Resident Evil 7? Are you fucking kidding me? It's finally happening. Holy shit, I have to play it. And it's in first person? I remember that whole idea of incorporating the first-person perspective into the Resident Evil series was so fucking insane to me. They were taking such a bold move in the series, adding new characters to the timeline and even scarier villains. Every single trailer I watched for Resident Evil 7 had me on my toes. Tons of fans were heavily disappointed with the new perspective and direction that the game was going. Against everyone's wishes, Capcom stuck with this point of view. As the fans waited, nobody knew how it was going to turn out. After Resident Evil 6, I'm sure a lot of us probably thought, hey, it can't get any worse, right? Well, when the game first came out, I definitely had nothing but fun with it. The terrifying family that surrounds the game's evil and wicked arc are known famously now as the Bakers, and would become some of the most iconic villains in a Resident Evil/horror game in a long time. I mean, what do you remember about Derek Simmons from Resident Evil 6 besides his dumb fucking face? What do you remember about Excella besides her enormous tits? Nothing. Case in point. Jack Baker, in particular, is a very well done villain that adds nothing but fear to the experience. With multiple situations where he interrupts the hero of our story, constantly shit-talks to Ethan, and chases him down indefinitely, you can guarantee that Jack Baker scared the hell out of me when I first encountered him. Now obviously, I have my complaints about the game, as does everyone else, and they all make valid points, but I'll point those out later. The story can be summarized pretty quickly as the journey of Ethan Winters, a normal, everyday man who never bothered anyone or hurt a thing. He travels to Dulvey, Louisiana, in order to find his missing wife, who reportedly had sent him an email the night before claiming that she was ready to be picked up. There's no other context. Ethan literally came here because he got a note that said it was his wife who had been missing for 3 years. It could have been anybody. Why would you even trust that? The introduction is meant for nothing other than to throw you off entirely. Ethan discovers Mia in the basement of this house, but she's totally incoherent. She acts like she hasn't been missing all this time. She also denies ever sending him an email to begin with. I'll admit, my first playthrough, I was confused as fuck, but I think that was the intention for first-time players. Suddenly, the tables turn when Mia starts to attack Ethan. It's clear that she's being manipulated by some sort of virus that she can't gain control of the way she talks to herself. Ethan must fight her off in a hilarious 1v1 match. I never thought I'd play a Resident Evil game where I have to drive a stingy wooden axe into my wife's collarbone. Jesus. Turns out she's still fine, but she's also still infected. In one of the most gruesome scenes in a video game to date, Mia stakes Ethan's hand into the wall using a screwdriver, only to then remove his hand with a fucking chainsaw. Oh my god, the game just said fuck you to the player in the wildest way. It's a really great turn of events. It comes down to a final showdown in the attic, with Ethan defending himself against the very miscalculated Mia. You have limited ammunition here, so it's best to try and make every shot count. Once Mia goes down, Ethan roams for a few more seconds, only to be surprised by the daddy of the house. First, it goes without saying, if you worship the Resident Evil series like I do, you'll learn to appreciate the things they do to make this a genuinely horrifying experience. The opening sequence shows this twisted family of crazy people who eat intestines to survive, forcing you to try it, cutting your face up. It's wildly effective to the player. There were a lot of complaints towards Ethan's hand in particular. You're probably thinking the same thing. How the fuck did Ethan just magically gain full cognitive functionality of his hand? We witnessed it get brutally chopped off using a fucking chainsaw. It's not exactly a clean, straight wound. I'd imagine your nerves and shit would be mangled to mush. But now suddenly it's back to full working condition, all thanks to a bunch of fucking staples. However, if you've played Resident Evil Village, you know by now what happened to Ethan and why he's able to overcome such tremendous odds. Plus, I think it's kind of cool that Ethan himself questions why he's able to survive such devastating injuries. I'm not gonna spoil it here, maybe in the future I'll make a Resident Evil Village video, but for now I'm just gonna say, play that game. The size of the house alone is massive, and the specific designs that went into creating it don't really make sense, but it's cool nonetheless. And without those features, I wouldn't really care to play it that much. There are different rooms that require specific keys, there's a shotgun trap just like the original games, and the puzzles require some light thinking and imagination. The shadow puzzles were kinda cool, and on my first playthrough, I'd be lying if I said I didn't stumble on a couple of them. Ethan wiggles his way out of the chair, and this is where you take notice of the grandmother. She glares at you with every step you take, but remains quiet and seemingly unbothered. Creepy old bitch, stop staring at me. Ethan hears a noise and notices a police officer in the window. In a bold attempt to achieve rescue, Ethan desperately begs the officer for a firearm. Instead, he's given a puny pocket knife. He goes to the garage, only to witness his savior get murdered in brutal grindhouse film fashion. This is the first fight we have with Jack, and it's a wacky experience. We may have a firearm now, but it's weak, and Ethan isn't exactly a trained mercenary. Jack has this big axe that destroys everything in his path, but if you're quick enough, you can grab the keys to Ethan's car and run him over with it. Oh, fuck, he climbed to the top? Jesus Christ, I wasn't expecting that. That's what I mean, man. These developers are always throwing twists in your direction, and I love it. Playing this part of the game for the first time was so exhilarating. Jack ends up crashing the car in an attempt to kill Ethan, but it doesn't work. Eventually, the car lights up in a flame. Ethan attempts to escape, but Jack has other plans. So yeah, the Bakers are pretty fucked up. They're all unique and offer different sorts of horror shows for Ethan to endure. To add to the stress, Jack chases Ethan down during the entire beginning segment. It isn't until after you collect the last dog head that Jack disappears for a while, but I'll get there when I fucking get there. You can't rush these things, you know. Anyways, with Jackass on our tail constantly, it can be hard to navigate the environment and search for items. Not to mention how limited Ethan's inventory is this early on, so you can't pick up the overwhelming amount of items you do find. That's not a complaint. If anything, it just takes me back to the OG days. Inventory management is a huge factor in Resident Evil 7. You have to make a few back and forth trips to the item box. So now that we've been let loose in the house and escaped Jack, our next task is to find 3 dog-shaped statuettes that can fit into the front door leading to the yard. The first 2 are easy to locate, but the third one requires us to fight Jack in an epic battle between man and machine. Quite literally. His weird chainsaw scissor invention is horrifying, but it fits his wacky and crazy personality. The player's first instinct is to grab the chainsaw and defend themselves, but he can be beat without it. This entire scene is straight out of a cinematic movie. The idea of fighting for your life with a chainsaw really put the players in an emotional state that I don't think can be described. Once you defeat him, he explodes in a meaty, chunky shower. Oh, disgusting. I think it's going to be a while before I eat lasagna again. From this point on, we can explore the yard. There are a few secrets hidden here, like the repair kit underneath the porch or the antique coin in the corner. There's also another stabilizer out here in the yard, but that requires the wooden axe to unlock, which can be found in the attic above Lucas's room. Ethan enters the RV, which looks like it belongs to Zoe. Her bra is dangling in the closet, and there's a picture on the wall that indicates Zoe was trying to save her family from whatever happened. If you try to leave, the phone rings. It's Zoe. You're probably wondering, who the fuck is Zoe? She's a main character that attempts to aid Ethan in rescuing Mia and herself from the Baker family. Being Jack and Marguerite's daughter, she witnessed firsthand what the infection did to her family and had to fight for survival ever since. I really liked Zoe, and I thought she deserved a lot more screen time in my opinion. With that in mind, we make our way to the old house. It's almost submerged in water completely, but standing nonetheless. As soon as we enter, these giant fucking bugs are seen clinging to the wall. You're gonna want to kill these things anytime they appear, and I mean fast, otherwise they'll sting your ass and surround you. Come on, stop moving so fast, you little shitbird. Got you now, stupid bug. Oh yeah, how about these? They look like spiders, only they're much more annoying and creepy. They can leap all over Ethan if he gets too close, but it is possible to get rid of them using the knife. The fastest way to get rid of them is to use the burner. After destroying the nests in the next room, Ethan finds a crawl space in the fireplace. He also finds another statuette when suddenly Mia interrupts him, only to be kidnapped by Lucas. Well, time to go be a hero and save my wife. Nothing's gonna stop us now. Okay, well, I guess we'll have to euthanize Marguerite real quick. If she spots you, she'll send a flurry of demonic little beetles to come and bite your skin. If you deal enough damage to her, she'll run away, giving you some much needed breathing room. But you'll probably use a lot of resources in the process, so it's not always worth it. Soon afterwards, we get the required piece for the next statue puzzle that will get us into the other side of the old house. Going underneath the porch will reveal a hand crank, which helps us to draw the bridges for us to cross. This is also the chapter where Ethan obtains the burner, or flamethrower, or whatever you call it. It's the most useful weapon against Marguerite and grants you a lot of space between flying enemies. Using the crank, Ethan grabs the crow key. Making his way back, he's intercepted yet again by Mama Yucky. She's relatively easy to fight here, but I remember feeling super anxious on my first playthrough. You can't move very far when you're stuck inside the hole. Your only option is to defend yourself at this uncomfortable angle as an elderly woman taunts and harasses you. Once she falls down, you're free to climb out of the hole. Well, good riddance to Marguerite. Now we can proceed to the attic and— oh, never mind. I guess we need that lantern that she was holding in order to counterbalance the weight of the lock on this door. That sounds complex. I mean, come on, you're telling me Ethan can't just pull down on the fucking thing? No big deal, let's just jump back down the hole and— Oh my fucking god. It's terrifying. Seeing Marguerite in her final form, she's an obsessed psychotic creature with some sort of hive permanently attached to her groin area. It really doesn't get any more disgusting or disturbing than this. No shit though, I loved her boss battle, and I still do today. Sure, it's fucking gross with the bug stuff and body horror, but Marguerite's dialogue is sold in every trembling way. Her humiliating insults towards Ethan are so degrading and vile, the voice actress nailed it with a ball-peen hammer. Once she becomes nothing but breadcrumbs, you can take the lamp from her and proceed back to the old house to roam the attic. In here, Ethan must find a mutilated arm that can be combined with another strange body part known as the D-series head. Both can be used to develop a cure for the mold infection. I don't really understand it to this day, and I've beaten the game more times than I've beaten myself off. But once we collect it, Ethan makes a desperate attempt to run out of the attic and back to the camper where he finally meets Zoe. Or maybe not. Okay, now she's fucking calling me.
Now, if you want the head, feel free to come by any time and I'll give it to you.
Oh great, it's this asshole. Lucas Baker, as annoying as he can be, was a pretty well-developed villain and fit right underneath the nervous tension that his father Jack had brought. Each of his segments are scripted for Ethan, so that means you never have to worry about him chasing you or fighting him one-on-one, so to speak. But you do have to be exposed to some disgustingly awful imagery. Look at this. A headless corpse with a key stuck in the neck? That's horrifying. I can't imagine a worse fate for someone. Well, we get the snake key, which gives us access to the areas where we'll find Lucas's key cards. They're not too complicated to obtain, but this part is pretty hard if you're underprepared, so make sure to stock up on ammo and medicine. This is where Ethan discovers the four-legged molded. They're much faster and weaker than the standard grunts, but they strike hard and jump all over the fucking place. You don't want them to surround you. Once Ethan gathers both of the keys, he makes his way into Lucas's funhouse of horrors. In the attic, you can find trophies belonging to Lucas dedicated to his excellent skill in the technology and robotics field, winning second place in most of the tags. That explains the obscure obstacle course he has set up for us with bombs planted across almost every surface of the wall. It's a miracle that Ethan survived, considering he had zero survival experience until now. Then, the game switches tactics again. Before you have a chance to find an escape route in this huge pit, you have to connect the battery to the lift. Once that's done, Ethan is greeted by the bloated molded creature that pukes acid and belly flops you to death. He's an easy boss battle so long as you've saved up your more powerful weapons for this point. You then get the codes for the door downstairs, but this has to be one of my least favorite segments of the game if I'm being honest. Ethan is forced to strip himself of every single item he's carrying in order to go through the door. Lucas appears and locks us in against our will in what's supposed to be some sort of saw trap. There's even a creepy fucking clown. This puzzle is quickly solvable if you've watched the happy birthday tape that you can grab from the attic in Lucas's room. The word on the dial has to be set to loser. Seeing his plan is foiled, Lucas drops a huge time bomb inside the room with Ethan. Acting fast, Ethan has to put it inside the wall. It explodes directly behind Lucas's office, where we see Mia and Zoe on the monitor. Now you have to painstakingly grab all of your inventory items again. That's what I hate about the Saw Trap segment. For no reason they take away your guns. It's not like guns would have helped me in that puzzle anyway. I'm supposed to light the fucking candle. I can't exactly shoot it. But to add insult to injury, they also take away your items. Oh, gee whiz, that health bottle might have really helped me cheat out of that puzzle. Can't be too careful nowadays. Ethan escapes Lucas's devious game, but Lucas also manages to wriggle away like the worm he is. Ethan has to travel once again across a series of rotting wooden docks. You kill a few molded here, and then you get your ass upstairs in the main boathouse. Ethan meets Zoe, the only sane member of the Baker family left. She takes the items from Ethan and creates a cure for the mold infection on the spot. Oh, Jesus Christ, I wasn't expecting that. Now all of a sudden we're fighting a mutated Jack Baker. What the hell is he? He looks like a pile of Play-Doh after it was consumed by a dog and shat out. He looks like roadkill that spent too long in the sun. Either way, he's one tough son of a bitch. On opening day for its release, I struggled for hours on Jack's boss fight. It didn't occur to my tiny little man brain that his yellow eyeballs are his weak points until my third fucking attempt. Targeting them will bring him down pretty quickly. Except, there's one right on his ass or his pussy or something that's tucked underneath his tail and it's insanely hard to hit. The fucking slug monster doesn't stop wriggling it either, so you're never gonna hit it. I'm just kidding, it's possible, it's fucking frustrating. Finally, the only way to defeat Jack is to inject him with one of the serums. After Ethan does this, Jack turns to stone just like Marguerite did. He walks to the boat with Zoe and Mia, standing anxiously. This is where you, as the player, get a defining choice. Who do you save from the infection? Zoe, the lady who has guided you all this time and given you tips about her family and what we need to survive? Or your fucking wife who's very obviously hiding something and left for 3 years without another word and lied to you about it? Well, the obvious choice is to save Mia. I'm probably not going to cover the other ending because I have a lot of other things to go over with this game, and the other ending isn't really worth talking about anyway. It kinda sucks. Ethan and Mia sadly row the boat away from Zoe, contemplating if they made the right choice. This is when the boat is attacked by, big surprise, a giant molded tentacle. Once again, we're thrown a massive curveball here. We wake up to find that we're playing as Mia now, and Ethan is knocked out just a few feet away. I remember trying my hardest to get a good look at Ethan's face here. I was so curious for the longest time because Capcom has officially revealed what Ethan Winters looks like, but for some reason still felt the need to hide any sign of his visual identity with Resident Evil Village. It's really bizarre. The fucking boat. I think anyone who has played Resident Evil 7 has unanimously agreed that the boat chapter, when you play as Mia, is way less than average. I'll be honest, it's downright terrible. First of all, Mia has to watch this fucking VHS tape that Evelyn forces upon her. This takes us to a flashback segment where Mia was at work and had to deal with the viral outbreak at its core among a massive sea cruiser that seems indestructible. The girl in question is named Evelyn, and she's referenced throughout the entire game up until you see her. She's an infected patient that was under the watchful eye of Mia Winters, who took upon the false title of being her mother in order to get closer to her for research purposes. Lots of fans of RE7 complained about Evelyn's cheesy voice acting and annoying dumb face, but I think it fits the aesthetic well. She's a representation of her inner child and forever sees anyone who insults her as prey, with the complete ability to just kill you if you rub her the wrong way. She's a really creepy enemy. This part is really frustrating because Mia doesn't have the same items that Ethan does. Sure, she gets an SMG in her flashback, but if you want to get it again when you return to present day, you'll have to find the captain's key. Not an insanely hard task, but it requires a silly amount of backtracking. I usually try to speedrun my way through Mia's segment. It just sucks, plain and simple. You're ill-equipped to handle the infected within the ship until you find access to the second floor. Here, you're forced to guide Mia through the environment in search of 2 essential items for the elevator, a fuse and a power cable. It's a lot easier said than done if you're a beginner. The fuse is easy to grab as it's located just downstairs in the back laundry room. Oh, fuck. Okay, well, normally it's pretty easy, but this time I got fucked up by the 4-legged molded dick. The power cable is another story because Mia has to fight a big fat fucking waste of space in order to grab it. Thankfully, once you get the required items, you can proceed in saving Ethan. Now it's time for me to talk about one of my favorite cutscenes in the game, if not the best in my opinion. When Ethan is submerged in this mold-like cocoon, he somehow is able to to connect with Jack Baker's soul, or conscience or something. He talks to him in some ethereal out-of-body universe, begging Ethan to bring an end to Evelyn's reign of terror. I will admit, I was pretty confused as to how or why Ethan is able to communicate with the real Jack, but it was a pretty big reverse card to pull, showing his humanity behind the monster. Ethan once again is separated from Mia, who succumbs to the infection that Evelyn brought upon them. Ethan trudges along and discovers a mine that stretches miles across, filled to the brim with molded of all types. Consider this the finale fight of the game, flying past the fucking melted morons and get to the house in time to stop Evelyn. Then there's a giant ladder that you somehow have to climb, but look at this stupid nonsense. There's two fucking bloated coming after me, so now I gotta get rid of them first. Once you get up there, you discover a hole in the wall that leads directly to the basement of the old house. Are you shitting me? Has this been here the whole time? And no. If you replay the game and check this room before Mia takes off, you can clearly see it's just a concrete wall with nothing behind it. Wouldn't it have been so much cooler if this were here the entire time and you could quite literally see the end of the game in sight? Well, now we have one last task: to kill Evelyn. Ethan uses a complicated toxin capable of neutralizing the mold infection entirely. He sticks her with the needle, and then this happens. What the fuck? Okay, that's great. Evelyn turned into the goddamn wall, and now she's trying to eat me. Your only hope is to spray into her and pray that you deal enough damage to win. Then suddenly she throws us outside. It's a pretty epic scene full of dramatic music and fantastic visuals. You're not allowed to move at all during this boss fight since Evelyn grabs Ethan as if he's nothing more than an action figure. Soon enough, somebody randomly drops a weapons case near Ethan's head. It's a prototype handgun with supreme stopping power and damage. You blow the crazy bitch's face off, and the nightmare is over. Oddly enough, Chris Redfield himself makes a cameo in the game. Apparently, he is now working for Umbrella as a PMC. Wait, what? I'll admit, during my first run of the game, I was really confused. Why does Chris look like that? He looks nothing like he did in the previous installments. In fact, I think this version of Chris was so unanimously hated that they reverted back to the original model and swapped voice actors. You might be thinking, how can an interpretation of Chris Redfield be bad? He's one of the most iconic characters within the Resident Evil franchise. He's just one of the few people who survived the original Raccoon City incident and an onslaught of trauma afterwards. He's a true veteran in games today. But here, it's understandable why some people, including myself, weren't a big fan of this rendition. Much like Ethan, Chris's voice actor in 7 comes off very loose and relaxed. He doesn't really act like the Chris we knew before, and he doesn't have as many badass quips this time around. Also, what the fuck happened to his muscles? Don't tell me that he stopped lifting weights and taking steroids from Resident Evil 5 because that Chris was actually fucking cool. I guess it's personal preference. I wasn't praising the performance of my childhood icon this time around. Maybe I'm in the minority for that, but that's just how I feel. Anyways, Ethan reunites with Mia somehow, and after everything is finally over, he gives a pretty decent speech summarizing the events he had to go through. It's oddly inspiring.
They say that when one door closes, another opens. Well, a door closed tonight. And what a long night it was. But not just for me. Me and I weren't the only victims here. So were the Bakers. It was that thing, Evelyn, who made them that way.
That, my friends, is Resident Evil 7's main campaign. There's a reason I love the game so much more than the others, and while the shock value alone was disturbing as all hell, the graphics were so realistic and smooth for almost every single platform. It's a gruesome horror movie that you're in control of, and I'll never not love it for that. The gameplay is as addicting as the other games with tons of replay value. Playing on Madhouse difficulty alone is not recommended for beginners, but it's fun to memorize the layouts of different traps and key locations, new enemies appearing in other rooms of the houses, It mixes up the difficulty and surprise element, not to mention rewards you heavily for completing it. We're nowhere near done though, as there is way more to the story of Resident Evil 7. Not long after the success of the game's release, Capcom made 2 DLCs to follow up more behind the story of the Baker family. These DLCs were divided into parts, Banned Footage Volumes 1 and 2. Before I talk about banned footage, the first DLC I want to go into detail with is the obvious sequel that was announced as a free update to the game's story. Not a hero. It's the direct conclusion to the Baker family mutation with Chris Redfield as the frontman of the free DLC. The plot goes as follows. Chris is tasked with locating his missing Umbrella operatives when suddenly he's interrupted by Lucas Baker from the main game. This is when Lucas forces Chris to play along in a ridiculous manic series of objectives in order to escape and capture his ugly ass for good. This DLC, in my opinion, is probably the weakest link in the chain of Resident Evil 7 as a whole. It's a lot more action-oriented, but lacks the true feel that it needs. Chris moves at the exact same pace and speed as Ethan. There's no change besides the voice, view model, and the ability to melee your enemies when they're stunned, if you could fucking time it right. Honestly, it's not a bad DLC by any means, but it does feel repetitive a lot, so I'm more than likely gonna skim through this one a bit. They often spawn a lot of enemies that become too much to handle. This is done intentionally. It's to get you used to playing as Chris and mastering his less than subpar hand-to-hand combat. The most effective weapon in Chris's inventory off rip is the Thor shotgun, but ammo for it can be pretty scarce. Lucas attaches a timed bomb to Chris's wrist, therefore trapping him into this never-ending Saw game. That's another minor complaint I had about this DLC. I was annoyed by Lucas. You're probably thinking, yeah, he was annoying in the campaign too, that's part of his character. Yeah, obviously, but I find it a bit ridiculous that there was time somehow for Lucas to design this elaborate saw trap. And on top of that, if he were really trying to run, why did he go back to the same fucking mine located right underneath their house? Did he really think the BSAA wouldn't look there? They introduce a new enemy type in this DLC as well, a stronger type of molded that can only be killed using a special ramrod caliber of ammunition. Only the handgun is capable of holding ramrods for some reason. I don't know, it would have been cool to have slugs or something for the shotgun. Problem is, these new molded aren't really scary, nor do they add anything major to the lore of them as a whole. They just get in the way a lot. If you do have ramrods, you can easily take them out, but those are also really rare. Add insult to injury that they fucking force you to fight this giant bloated asshole who is also immune to standard gunfire. He can be killed without ramrods, but it takes longer and it's much more frustrating. I did like how it shows Chris's team meet their demise one by one. I thought the gruesomeness of Lucas's unbeatable games wouldn't best the entire group, but they're all killed off in pretty creative ways. Once you finally complete all of his challenges, you're given the opportunity to directly confront Lucas. This is the finale of the DLC, and by far the most frustrating aspect. Out of nowhere, Lucas mutates into this giant monstrosity that moves a lot faster and harder than Chris does. With the restricted first-person angle, it doesn't help much in this environment. Lucas will deplete the oxygen completely at random times, which will result in you having to run your ass to the oxygen tanks at the end of the room. It's just another tedious obstacle that bludgeons the player in the middle of a boss fight. When the stupid fuck is finally dead, we get an actual decent line from Chris. It's probably his only one.
Game over.
With that, the saga of the Baker legacy has been closed for good, and the Mutamycete has been rendered obsolete. Except, no it hasn't. I can't lie, the storyline throughout the entire series of Resident Evil has always been a little cockeyed in some directions. Obviously, this new mold mutation virus isn't in direct correlation to the same virus that brought the zombies back from the dead, but there are a few moments in the story that seem to not make a whole lot of sense. For example, the next DLC I want to go over is End of Zoe. This was announced as a totally new idea for fans of the game. In End of Zoe, you take on the role of Joe Baker. Who the fuck is that? Well, apparently he's Jack's brother. Yeah, Jack has a brother who lives in the swamps, not much farther from where the new house is. It's implied that Joe hasn't had any contact with his family or the outside world for quite some time. While I could agree that Joe's life as a hermit has caused him to grow distant from the harsh realities he was about to face, I still have to argue against it. How the fuck did Joe never know about what was happening to his brother's family? Well, anyways, that's not even the goofiest plot hole. In this entire DLC, Joe is equipped with only one weapon, his bare hands. It's hilarious. The first time I played End of Zoe, I couldn't possibly take it seriously, let alone see it as Resident Evil canon. I mean, come on, he's punching fucking everything. Joe Baker has a lot more balls than I do. Jokes aside, I don't feel like this DLC highlights what makes Resident Evil so good, but instead offers a break to the player after the horrendously terrifying campaign. You don't have to worry about guns, so to speak, just work your way through the area and kill all of the enemies. It's pretty fun. Joe can even stealth kill the molded. What the fuck? You mean all Ethan had to do to kill these things was sneak up behind them and twist their fucking heads off? That would have been nice to know a lot sooner. Oh man, I got sidetracked. I forgot to tell you the plot of End of Zoe. In this DLC, Zoe is shown wandering through the woods when suddenly she freezes up and gets covered in some sort of strange white mold substance. When roaming around in the woods, Joe comes across these 3 Umbrella soldiers who found her. Surprisingly, he kicks the shit out of all 3 of them and manages to take Zoe back to his cabin, along with one of the soldiers. Destined to cure Zoe, Joe must trek across the swamps and find the antidote for his niece in order to put an end to the mold infection. At some point during the game, Joe is attacked by a strange, mysterious sludge monster. The Sasquatch Squid Guy, as I first referred to him, is a deadly opponent with mixed martial arts and WWE training moves at his disposal. Joe can throw some decent combos as well, so long as your timing is right. This Squid Guy also has the hots for Zoe. There are a few moments where this asshole shows up and you have to stop him from taking her away. It's not explained quite yet, but I'll cover that plot hole when I get to it. Anyways, there are all sorts of threats within End of Zoe. Not only do you have a new type of stronger armored molded, but you also have the introduction of Resident Evil's favorite mutated reptilians, the giant crocodiles. Or alligators, maybe, I don't know. You can't just run up and punch them either. Joe has to find crafting supplies in the environment to make throwable objects like spears and knives. This is the only way to take them out from a safe distance. Besides a few obstacle courses, some funny dialogue from Joe, and the combat, this DLC doesn't really offer much to fans besides making them question the plot some more. I don't really believe that Joe was just in isolation during the boat's destruction, the spawning of Evelyn, and the death of his brother. It's very strange that he just never reached out nor was ever brought up in the main game. But finally we get an explanation. After finding where the squid creature brought Zoe, we discover who is hiding behind the disgusting slap on the creature's face. Wait, what? It's Jack? Okay, I guess. This is mildly confusing. I mean, I thought we killed Jack in the main game after Ethan injected him with a cure? Wasn't that how it went? And what about the vision Ethan has when he's under the control of Evelyn's mold? Jack seemed human again, and I know it wasn't supposed to be the actual him, it's probably more so his conscience, but this doesn't make any sense to me. Why is Jack still alive? I guess you could say that he's driven by love or whatever. So yeah, it's once again time to fight Jack. This time Joe finds a very conveniently placed weapon that he can use to defeat Jack and save Zoe's life. The AMG is a modified mechanical glove capable of dealing massive damage to enemies. You can even charge it up for a much heavier attack, and I can't lie, it's pretty fucking sweet to hear that computerized voice in combat. So Joe finally gives his brother one last wake-up call and rescues Zoe in time for the Umbrella team to come in and extract them. Thanks to Ethan, Zoe's life was saved, and thanks to her uncle, the Baker family mutation has ended. Man, I still got a couple to cover, but the next DLCs aren't nearly as long as the ones I've just talked about, so they should be relatively easy. I already talked about Ethan Must Die, a game mode where you play as Ethan with multiple hardcore factors taking place that constantly throw you off your game. The goal is simple. You have to get the greenhouse key to fight Marguerite and win. At least, it sounds simple, but since I've already covered Ethan Must Die on this channel before, I'm gonna go ahead and skip it for now. Bedroom is a short puzzle game, kinda. You play as Clancy, one of the filmmakers from Sewer Gators. He's locked inside this bedroom with no means of escape as Marguerite brings him the most foul of dishes I've ever seen in my life. Once she leaves, Clancy's goal is to escape. There's a certain order you have to do things if you want to win the game. Going in blind to this escape room is a risky game. Using only items within the room, Clancy has to figure out a way to get out of the bedroom and away from this family. The trick is, whenever Clancy does something that causes a lot of noise, or progresses really, Marguerite will come back within a time limit. If Clancy isn't back in bed by the time she comes back, it's game over. It's tricky though, because you also have to make sure the room looks the exact same as when Marguerite left. Otherwise, she'll notice the difference and it's an instant death. Bedroom is a fun little mode with lots of trivial puzzles, but being that it's not exactly randomized, containing the same formula for each playthrough, it lacks the weight I think it could have held. Maybe a hardcore option with different item locations would have been a welcome change, but I think this DLC existed more so as a means to give Clancy some more limelight in the story. The same goes for the next DLC, known as Nightmare. In this surprisingly addicting mode, the player once again takes control of Clancy in the basement. Your only goal is to survive waves of different enemies at once, all the while activating these scrap machines for Clancy to turn scrap into useful items like weapons, ammo, health, and other essential things from the game. The higher your score goes, the more rewards you unlock for Nightmare. It gets tougher as time goes on. At the very end, you have to fight a doubles chainsaw Jack Baker along with 10 fucking molded variants. Once you beat it, you'll unlock Night Terror, which is the same mode, but a lot harder with tougher enemies and even scarcer resources. Another short fun mode you can try out is the 21 card game. Here, once again, Clancy is taken captive by Lucas Baker. Jeez, this guy can't catch a fucking break. Only this time, there's no getting up and moving around or fighting enemies. You're playing 21. So it's a literal fight for your life over a card game. You go up against Hoffman, some asshole with no face, he doesn't matter. Fuck him. But honestly, I like the creepiness behind this DLC. They did a fantastic job replicating a maniacal saw trap, some sick bastard's fantasy of power as he watches two desperate men try to kill each other in order to survive. What's even more gruesome is when Hoffman dies. Yeah, once Clancy wins, Hoffman is horribly maimed, but Lucas decides to pretend to play as him to keep the game going. It's fucking wild, and the first time I played this DLC, I couldn't believe I was tricked like that. See, it's not like many other horror games today. The idea that the player is in a terrible situation while the villain watches with grimace and excitement from afar is never going to not bug me. Once Clancy wins against Lucas, you're free to continue playing 21 against other opponents for more rewards and unlocks. The game increases in difficulty as you complete the challenges. Last but certainly not least, I want to discuss the Daughters DLC. This was the biggest extra mode with the banned footage announcement, as it tells the story of Zoe Baker and how things went for her when her family was first infected by Evelyn. It's bittersweet to say the least. For the first time in the entire game, we see Jack, Marguerite, and Lucas all engaging with one another like a normal functioning family. They talk, make jokes, argue lightly. It encapsulates true fear in your heart when you discover just what's about to happen. After Evelyn is brought to the house by Jack, she kinda randomly just switches into her appropriate evil personality. The shock value that comes from the Daughters DLC is amplified by the massive amount of confusion Zoe portrays. When Marguerite is the first to be infected, Jack is seen fighting with her and trying to figure out how to help. He begs Zoe to go grab rope from the garage so he can restrain her. You can imagine Zoe's confusion when she comes back with the rope just to see Jack drowning her mother in the bathtub. It's pretty visceral, and it reminds you that Evelyn's powers are just wacky. There are two endings to this DLC, the good and the bad. If you want the bad ending, you'll basically have to play the game like normal. However, if you want the good ending, you can search around the accessible parts of the house in order to get outside and hide in the camper. This is where Zoe discovers Mia, and ultimately where the story begins for Ethan. Zoe does have a flashback of her family when life was normal, but due to the fact that Evelyn has cast her deadly grips on the entire bloodline, she will be cursed to remain infected until Ethan arrives, and even some time after that. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just covered every single aspect I could within this game, and I gotta say, it's a fucking fantastic adventure. Even though Ethan is heavily under-equipped to deal with the horrors he faces, he stays strong and confident in himself, trying to bring an end to what ruined both his life and the Bakers. With Evelyn dead and gone, the infection has passed. Ethan and Mia return home to do whatever the hell they wish, and it's over. There's a lot I'm leaving out of this review, I know, like unlockables, challenges, weapons, upgrades, overall amazing gameplay moments, but I'm telling you, if you haven't so much as touched Resident Evil 7 yet, please do. It's a genuine scare, leaving you full of dread and fear, running around this maze of a house and finding out the truth at the end. Plus, I think it's safe to say that this was a really decent debut for Ethan's character in Village. I don't know what it is about Resident Evil 7, but I'm convinced ever since I bought it that I paid money for an absolute masterpiece. If you guys are curious to check out more Resident Evil 7 related stuff, try giving my Ethan Must Die playthrough a watch. It's not an easy mode by any means, but it is pretty fun. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you made it this far, you're a trooper, and I respect you for listening to my annoying voice. See you next time. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed to our channel, and thanks for checking out this video. Leave a like, comment, and since we're on the subject, enjoy yourself. Thanks for watching the content, folks.